her musical composition that she did exclusively for us. You can only hear this song at Unity of Vancouver right now. It is the New Aramaic translation of the Lord's Prayer, set to music by Beverly Elliott and Tom Arnson.
Holy Spirit, creator and life of all, create a space inside us and fill it with your presence. Let oneness now prevail. Your one desire flows through ours as energy fills all forms. Give us this day our physical and spiritual nourishment. Untangle the knots of error that bind us as we also release others. Don't let appearances make us forgetful of the source, but free us to act from our highest nature. From your presence comes the glorious harmony of life. May these words be fertile ground from which our future grows. Amen.
Thank you so much, Beverly. I know the last time that you did it a cappella, many people said to me how much they felt it. So now it's my pleasure to introduce, for the meditation segment of our service today, Dr. William Keepan.
Good morning. Thank you, Beverly, for that beautiful song, the music, and the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, or translated from Aramaic. So let us now gently close our eyes or have a soft gaze to the keyboard. Let's begin with a couple of deep breaths, filling your lungs with air. And on the exhale, feeling that blessing and that release. Feeling your consciousness settling inwardly. And another deep in-breath. And exhale. Allowing your awareness to descend below the neck and inhabit your body. One more deep breath inward. And exhaling. And as you exhale, feeling that calming, centering presence that comes when we attend to the breath. And today, as we move into this service on kindness, and after hearing all that wonderful good news that Randy summarized, it's very important for us to remember that love and kindness are indeed the forces that drive the world. As Gandhi said, history is nothing other but the record of the interruptions of the force of love, the forces of love and kindness and compassion, which every day are constantly fueling and resolving billions of conflicts and bringing joy to billions of hearts. And what we call history are the occasional interruptions of that miraculous gift of love and kindness. So as we move into this meditation, I'll just tell a very short story, and then I'll invite you to find one that fits for you in your life. When I was 6 years old, I was up at the ski hill one day, cold, shivering, alone, and I couldn't ride the rope tow because it was too big for me. And I didn't know how. In those days, the lift was simply a rope and you had to grab onto it, use your hands as a clutch. And that would then drag you up the mountainside. And there was a big, tall man who I knew vaguely. He was a friend of the family, but I didn't know him well. And he saw me there and he bent down and he said, "Would you like me to show you how to ride this?" And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. And I couldn't believe he was paying attention to me when there was all these people around. And he picked me out. And he did. He showed me how to ride it. And then he had me ride up behind him, made sure I was okay. And then he went off. And I spent the rest of that day skiing. That single act of kindness took him 5 minutes. And it stayed with me for a lifetime. Decades later, not too long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I ran into this man at a wedding reception. Hadn't seen him in probably 50 years or more. I couldn't believe it when I heard he was there, and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to tell him. So I sat down with him and I told him this story. And of course, he didn't even remember, but he beamed by hearing the story because he didn't do it as something to be remembered. He simply did it as a response to a child's need. It didn't take much time, but it did take an attentive heart. So I invite you now to think of a time when someone was kind to you, out of the blue, unbidden, as it were. Just reflect across your life. And if you can't think of a specific time, but it's probably happened many times, just imagine the feeling that you have or would have when someone is kind to you, unbidden. Just in the moment, responding with a gesture, responding with a kind word, whatever it was. And just reflect on how that impacted you. And whether it was something that happened this morning or something that happened decades ago. Reflect on what did that teach you? What did you learn from that moment of kindness? And how has it inspired you to act with kindness? To be an instrument of compassion and kindness as you move through life. Let us sit in silence with that awareness, that reflection.
Gather shells beside the sea. I want to live like that. I want to live that way. I don't want to be afraid. I want to love like that every day. I want to live like that. want to live that way. I don't want to be afraid. I want to love like that. Every day with every breath I take, I want to live like that. I want to live. I want to live like that. I want to live. I want to live like that. I'm gonna live. I'm gonna live like that.
Thank you, Beverly.
Welcome.
Has anyone ever told you you have a beautiful voice?
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Thank you so much. My pleasure. My pleasure. So much.
Saint Augustine said, he or she who sings prays twice. And thank you for sharing that prayer with us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Reverend Cynthia Brix and Will Keepin for their talk today, Kindness and a Grateful Heart.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama did indeed say, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." So thank you, Randy. That was great. It fit right into my opening line. And
I'm sorry, I hope I didn't steal your thunder.
no, it's okay. You just validated it even further. So it's just lovely to know that just think about that. My religion is kindness. Now, when I looked up the word religion, of course, many of us know that it comes from the Latin word meaning to tie or to bind. And in many ways, religion can certainly do tying and binding of us. In fact, we're trying to untie the knots of our error. And some of us have come from religions that have been hard for us, difficult. And so part of the piece there, excuse me, part of it is to untie this piece to be in more kindness and generosity in our hearts. And yet religion also means that it's the human being's relation. This is a definition from the dictionary. Relation to that which they regard as holy, sacred, absolute, spiritual, divine, or worthy of especial reverence. It is also commonly regarded as consisting of the way people deal with ultimate concerns about their lives and about their fate after death. So that's one definition of religion. And when the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, says, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." For me, that means that kindness is love in action. It's really, how do we practice this? He went on to say, "This is my simple religion. There is no need for temples, no need for complicated philosophies. Our own brain and our hearts in our temple. They are that is our temple. The philosophy is kindness. So our own brain and heart is our temple. The philosophy is kindness." So as spiritual beings in this physical body, being kind is our practice in this world. And doesn't our world need it right now? You spoke so beautifully, Randy, of bringing us into the goodness of what's happening, and we often lose sight of that. I do, just going on Facebook or going in the news or whatever, we're bombarded. I'm bombarded by the negativity of what's going on. And what I witnessed is it can cause division. It can cause, and it can cause us to separate, it can cause fear. And so to bring that unity of unifying and doing it through kindness, in our kindness of action unifies, it connects, it ties us in together, makes us community as a whole. And as we look at that, well, first I'll say that I'll just tell you about someone you may know. Some of you may know this man. His name is Anthony Douglas Williams. He's a Canadian spiritualist. He's a writer and animal rights activist. And he said, do one act of kindness each day of the year and change 365 lives. Isn't that beautiful? One act. And how many people, how many things can we change in the world? And I would suggest we add one more, 366, because we need to include ourselves. And sometimes being kind to ourselves is harder than being kind to another. The negative self-talk that comes in, the things that, you know, I've gained too much weight, my clothes aren't fitting well enough, I can't show up, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have the courage enough. These things, even with all the practices we do and the affirmation prayer of knowing we are smart enough, we are love, we are light, we are kindness, we are the living beings, the living divine in the body. All of these things that we say to ourselves every single day are so important, and yet that negative self-talk can start seeping back in. And so when that comes in, to be kind to ourselves, to bring it back into giving kindness back. And what does that look like? But to bring the affirmation prayer back into your heart. Bring the mantra back into your heart. Bring the God back into your heart. Because if we don't, then we're living in the false illusion, the false ego again. So you've heard me speak about one of my teachers and mentors, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, who's a Buddhist nun. She has said, you know, imagine that you're speaking to your best friend. What would you say to your best friend when you have that negativity coming up? And why don't we act like we're our best friends and be kind to ourselves and say the same thing to ourselves when those thoughts come up? Say it to ourselves in the same kind way. So as we know, starting with ourself around kindness is most important. So then when we are kind to ourselves, we can bring it out into the world and be kind in an even grander way with the people out in the world. And what we're doing, what the practice is, of course, is to polish our own hearts so that the world does change. So as we polish our hearts in kindness and in love and in compassion, then we are doing the same in our actions out in the world. So Will and I are going to share a few stories today from our own life around kindness. And I thought, well, first of all, I want to say that I was struck by the affirmation this morning of the daily word. And I'm often struck of how it aligns so perfectly. I don't know why I am. Why should I be? It's not a coincidence, right? But here we are again. So the affirmation is, I imagine a world transformed by peace and love. So just take that in for a minute. I imagine a world transformed by peace and love. And as we go through our time together today in these stories, we invite you to imagine that world. Imagine how kindness is played out in your own life and how that in turn brings that peace and love transformed in the world. And of course, as the more we develop kindness in our own hearts, the more joy and love we have in our hearts. So we become more joyful people, more loving people, more kind people. So I'm going to share a little story about when I was in divinity school, and I had an opportunity to go and work with a ministry on the streets just for a few days, a weekend. And the ministry worked with street people. And the program that I was invited into was to become homeless for the weekend and to experience what that was like. And so I put on, it was raining outside, so I put on a plastic bag. I cut a hole through the plastic trash bag, one of those big black trash bags. I put it over my head. I didn't wear any makeup. I had, scrubby clothes on. We weren't allowed to have any money in our pockets. I intentionally brought kind of my appearance down so that I could fit in more with the homeless street people. But I didn't realize that as I went through the process. I knew I was doing that, but I didn't realize the impact of that. So as the time went on, it was quite a powerful experience, and I became hungry, and then I didn't have money. I didn't have any watch on. I couldn't figure out what time it was. I got pretty disoriented just on the very first day from the whole experience. And I started realizing it's getting kind of dark and I need to get back to home base. I need to get back to the shelter where we're supposed to meet up again. And so I started just asking people walking by, can you tell me the time? And what I was met with was unkindness by people who I considered were part of my community, part of my status quo, part of my life, people who aligned with me usually. But all of a sudden, because they saw me as a street person, I was no longer in their energy field of love and kindness. And so, I asked a woman who was walking by with her husband, and she just kind of looked me up and down. She had a watch on her wrist. I saw it, and she said, I don't have the time. I don't know the time. And she kind of pushed me off. That was shocking, totally shocking. And so I asked someone else. They just walked by as if ignoring me. So it brought me into this world of realization of what people on the streets experience every day of their life. Finally, after some time, I asked one more person, this man who was walking by, and he stopped and he looked me in the eyes. He looked down at his watch and he told me the time. That was such a precious moment because that was the connection. That was the religion of kindness. That was the unity and the binding that brought us back together. And just to complete this story was that as I was being pushed out of my own so-called family and community, I started being welcomed in by the street people. They started noticing me, and with their hearts, they started bringing me into their world. So it was quite a powerful experience, as you can imagine. So I'll turn it to Will to share another story.
So our compassion and our kindness obviously needs to extend not only to other people, but to all beings. And I'll just share you a little story. A few years back, I was driving one day. Cynthia was out of town, and I was driving. I was working. I had a lot to do, and I was taking a short break to go work out and take a swim. And then I could get back to my work. So I was driving with that, I got to go and do this and get back. I was on a country highway, probably going about 50 miles an hour. And I saw that up ahead there was something in the road, and it wasn't moving. It looked like, a small animal, little bunny rabbit or squirrel or whatever. And it wasn't moving, it was dead. So I didn't think about it. It was right in the middle of my lane. So I just aimed my car so that I would drive right over it. And right as I approached it, and I'm going 50 miles an hour or so, I saw right before that little thing went right underneath the car, I saw its little arm go up. It was reaching, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, that little being is alive. And of course, my car whished over it, and I was driving for like 30 seconds or so, and I looked back, and then I realized, that little animal is going to get run over, or is going to maybe die in the street with the constant intensity of cars driving over. I just knew I needed to stop and turn around and go see if there was anything I could do. So I did that. And it was like, there's that part of me, it's like, I want to get going. I have lots to do and all of that. But I just stopped. It was a moment out of time. I turned the car around. I drove back, parked it on the other side, went across the road. And sure enough, it was this little squirrel who had been injured to the point that he couldn't walk. But he wasn't bleeding. Or she, I don't know if it was a he or a she. And so I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I can move this squirrel off of this road. I can certainly do that. And that would make its experience much more pleasant. So I went back to my car and I found some cardboard or something that I could gently scoot under this squirrel, and carried the squirrel over to the side of the road and found a little place in the shade under a tree where I could place the squirrel. And as I did so, we communed. I mean, this squirrel was looking at me with that big squirrely eye. And of course, I was very close to it, because normally we get close to a squirrel, they scramble. So they try to get away. This one knew that I was helping him. And we connected. And there was that moment, and I'm sure you've had those moments where you connect across species. And I didn't know what to do other than to move this squirrel. I put him at what seemed like a comfortable place. It was certainly a much more comfortable place, even to die, if that's what was going to happen. And I stayed with him for a minute. I prayed with him. I didn't see any obvious injury. I didn't know what else to do, so I left him there. I talked to him also as I carried him over, and talked to him as I put him there. And then I got in my car and went on about my business. So that was all that happened. It was just a moment of compassion. And then Cynthia and I, when we were talking later, and then when she returned, we had a shocking realization, or not shocking, but kind of revelatory, if you will, because what we realized were two things. One, this happened exactly in the place where I 1 year earlier, to the day, 1 year earlier, had a very significant bicycle accident. And I did not realize when I stopped for this squirrel that I was at the same place where this accident had happened. And when that happened, I basically hit a tire, and my tire blew out, and I was thrown to the ground, and my right wrist was broken. I was in bad shape. And there was a bicycle rider who was up the hill a ways, who turned around. He heard something. He turned around and came and helped me, and basically said, "Do you need medical help?" And he waved down a car and asked them to take me to the hospital, which this car did, the people in this car. And, I was even bleeding a little bit, so they had to put some stuff on the floor. So there was this act of compassion for me that enabled me to get to the hospital. And I ended up getting actually flown out by helicopter, and then having, orthopedic surgery on my wrist. So this remarkable synchronicity that 1 year later to the day, in the same place, I was there again, and I was able to give some kind of attention to this little squirrel. Now, lest you think that I think that I am always compassionate and have that kind of projection onto me as a minister, one other quick story. Well, first of all, we did a retreat with Tenzin Palmo a couple of years ago, which was great. I mean, I love her dearly. And her whole teaching was on kindness and simple teachings around the importance of being kind. And she was bringing forth that. And I remember thinking, this is great, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. But I actually, I know this already. I wish she was going into the further reaches of Dharmakaya and bringing out, these subtle esoteric depths of Buddhism. But then not long ago, 4 months ago, I needed to get a medical procedure, and I was trying to arrange a time to do it. And I called, and I got a very warm and friendly nurse on the line who was giving me lots of information that I didn't want to hear about what I had to do beforehand, the bureaucracy involved, the difficulty of scheduling the appointment. And I was in not a good space. Actually, she had called me responding to a call, and she called at a bad time. Anyway, long story short, I was in an irritable mood, and I was basically responding to her kindness with unkindness. And after the call, Cynthia very graciously pointed this out to me. I was sort of resisted even receiving this news, but then realized how important that what she was saying was, and how this nurse was really coming from a place of kindness, and I was meeting her kindness with a kind of tight and resistant stiffness. And so when she called back to finalize the appointment a couple hours later, I then had the opportunity to apologize. And I took that as an important reminder, because this is a constant practice that we have to return to all the time. We can't just say, like I did after Tenzin Palmo's retreat, yeah, I know that already. We have to live it in every moment, and sometimes relearn it and relive it every day.
It's really important because it is a practice. And Will and I often talk about doing meditation and doing the inner work, and then going out in the world in service of some kind. This does both. And it's very simple. You don't have to sit in meditation for it. You have 366 opportunities because of every day plus you every day to do this practice. And so it's been an interesting process for us to reflect on, what are these acts of kindness and how does it show up in our life? And so as you move through reflecting, hopefully in the days to come and everything, we really encourage that. We have just a couple more sharings, and then we'll bring closure to our time here. But one reflection that's come up for me is this. Will and I, a few years ago, we went on a river trip in Utah, in the States. And in this beautiful area, this canyon, we were invited by some friends of ours who wanted us to come, and they had friends, and their friends were going to be the guides. And so we didn't know these other friends. So we show up at the river trip, and we're excited to get on the river. We were there for a week with the 6 of us. And the guide, the main person that was leading us, that knew everything about the river, he was not in a very happy mood. In fact, he had gotten pulled over by the police on his way to the river, which threw him into a pretty big rage. And what happened was it got projected onto Will and me, and one of the other people in the group. So we were pretty put off. Finding our level of kindness and compassion in that moment was rather challenging. because he was really just demanding that we do this and that and this, and like shouting orders like a commander, you know, in an army. This, I'm the river guide. You got to do this. You got to do that. He had the boat with all the food and everything in it, so we couldn't leave. We were held hostage on the river for 5 days. And how I've been holding that is, for lack of a better word, is the river trip from hell, basically. And this has been several years, and we've processed it and everything. But what's come up for me in reflecting on kindness is I've been holding him and his partner in unkindness ever since that river trip to this day. So in my meditation this morning,
I just want to say that our strategy for dealing
right.
with it was to be completely kind to them. So we were trying to base it, was coping strategy,
important
really.
point, yeah. In
Yeah,
fact,
so we
we've started-
responded with constant kindness and offering to bring them coffee and do the dishes, and we just tried to
we just surrendered. We totally surrendered.
try to reverse
it.
the whole dynamic.
We were stuck, and then we'd go back to our tent and just kind of collapse into each other. But we'd show up at 5 a.m. with a cup of coffee for the guides, you know. So it was fine. It was a good practice. It gave us lots of grist for the practice. But at the same time, I realized that I have been carrying him in my heart and his wife in a very negative way. So this morning, I was actually able to bring them into my heart space and start working on shifting that relationship, which I never talked with them again, but shifting it in my heart space with love, kindness, and compassion, because I'm sure he's going through a lot now with everything that we all are. And then finally, I want to share real quickly, because I think this is so important for where we are right now in this world, and how to be kind to each other. And I mentioned the media coming in and the Facebook and all being bombarded by all these images in the news, and our concern and how that fear can grow in us. There was a time not too long ago that I was in the gym, when we could be in the gym. So it's been over a year ago, that I was watching the news, and there was a big flood in Mississippi, and the newscaster was up doing live reports of this flood, and he was in a helicopter, and we're getting to see the play-by-play of the river just taking houses out and sweeping things away. And suddenly he realizes and sees a woman in the river who's being swept down the river, clinging to her life. And he's telling us, they're showing us the film clip, and I'm sitting there working out, watching the TV, seeing the captions and seeing the drama of this. This woman and he's saying, this woman, she's trying to grab hold of things, but the river's just taking her away, and the rescue boats can't get to her. We have called the rescue boats, but she is just on the edge of death here. I mean, he was just going for it. It's like a reality show. It was a reality show. And I was drawn into it. I'm looking up at the TV, and my heart is pounding, and I'm thinking, I'm getting into the drama of it all. And she finally was able to cling to a tree, got a tree limb, and she's holding on for dear life. And this newscaster doing his job was just reporting, but with all the play-by-play, kind of like a sports game. And suddenly I realized I need to be in prayer for this woman. I need to shift my energy and pray for her safety and her well-being. And so I started doing that. And I started thinking, I started pondering and wondering, what if the newscaster would all of a sudden say, let us all turn our attention inward to our heart. Let us all pour our heart, our loving kindness, our compassion, our prayers, our good wishes for this woman's safety. What might that have done? What change might have come? But he, of course, was tied into what his job was. And he probably would have gotten fired if that thought had even come to his mind. They probably would have cut the program over. My gosh, if he had even said that, I don't know. But the point is that she did live. She did get rescued. Thank God. But here, her life was right before the international community as we watched her cling to life. And that's what's happening right now in our world. As we go through this constant kind of up and down and dramatic stories, the world is doing what the world needs to do. We are doing what we need to do. And as spiritual aspirants, if you will, as spiritual seekers, as people committed to the spiritual path,